He succeeds me as Duke of Cornwall and takes on the responsibilities for the Duchy of Cornwall, which I have undertaken for more than 5 decades.
King Charles just made the most devastating move of his entire reign, and Harry is the one bleeding from it. He took the exact sword of honor Harry had desperately fought to keep and placed it directly into James's hands without a single warning. And the worst part? Archie and Lilibet's future has just been wiped out completely because of it, and there is no way to undo it. What is coming next is going to hit this family so hard and so personally that nothing they have been through before could have prepared them for it, and not one of them is ready. The king's shocking decision. Something deeply disturbing happened in the autumn of 2022. It shook Charles hard enough that he made a decision he had been circling for months. And depending on who you ask, it is not something that reflects well on anyone involved. But Charles did not see it that way. He saw something else entirely. It happened at Gordonstown, James's school, the same brutal Scottish boarding school where Charles himself had once walked those same cold stone corridors as a boy. Nobody standing in that corridor that autumn afternoon had any idea what James was about to do. It started after class ended. One boy decided to make the group laugh at someone James's expense. He said it loud enough that no one could pretend they had not heard it. "Your mom walks around like she matters, but she is nothing. She married your dad and started acting royal. She was not born into any of this. She came from nowhere, and that is exactly where she belongs." A few boys laughed, so he kept going. "The whole family looks at her like she is beneath them. They smile at her face but tear her apart the moment she turns away. Everyone does it, even the staff. She is a lowlife." James had always been the quiet one. Every single person in that school knew that about him, which is exactly why what happened next stopped the entire corridor dead. James's jaw suddenly locked. His breathing went sharp and fast. He took one step forward and his fist came up and it landed square on the boy's jaw. Hard, precise. The boy crashed back into the wall. His friends froze completely. For one full second, not one person in that corridor made a sound. Then the boy came back. He threw his own punch. And this is the moment that Charles would sit with for hours afterward, turning it over and over in his mind. James did not swing again. He caught the boy's fist in his bare hand, closed his fingers around it, held it completely still. The two of them stood face to face, James breathing hard, eyes completely level, and then James said it quietly. "Do not come near my family again." He let go of the boy's hand and walked away without looking back. Nobody in that corridor said a single word, because they had never seen that part of James. That story moved fast through the tight circle of powerful families whose children filled those classrooms, and eventually it landed in front of Charles. Then Charles did something no one expected. His private secretary quietly arranged for James to be brought to Windsor Castle for a private meeting with the king. And the reason Charles moved at all is the part of this story that nobody has told straight until now. What happened in that corridor was a message. James had heard something vicious said about his mother, and he did not put on the smooth, blank expression that every royal child is trained from birth to wear. The face that says nothing you say touches me. He reacted completely and immediately. But then, when the other boy came back, James stopped himself cold. He did not throw a second punch. He understood that another blow would escalate the whole thing. He had said what needed to be said and he left it there. That ability, to feel everything at full force and still know the exact moment to pull back, was what reached inside Charles and would not let go. Because that is not something you teach a person. You either have it or you do not. After that incident, Charles began comparing James to the other men in the family. He started with Harry. He had packed up his titles, his place in the line of succession, his children, and fled to California without looking back. William was the heir who was presently handling too much with little or no help. William was suffering inside, and even though he wouldn't admit it, Charles could see through him. As for Edward, he had spent rebuilding his image and had gradually earned his place in the hearts of the British people. The family loved Edward and Sophie, but Edward was too old and too worn out. Charles could not build something new from a man who had already given everything just to survive inside that family. Charles needed someone different entirely, someone young enough that every year spent on him would return something for decades ahead. someone who had not yet been noticed, not yet been picked apart by the press or the public, someone ready and willing to learn. But more than anything else, Charles needed someone who would stay loyal. Not loyal because it looked good, loyal because it was in them. And James had just shown exactly that, with zero awareness that anyone important was watching. When someone attacked the person he loved, he did not stop to think about the consequences. He acted, and when the moment called for him to stop, he stopped. On his own. Nobody told him. In a family where person after person had eventually chosen themselves over everything else, Charles had not seen that combination in a very long time. He looked James in the eye and said, "The ones they come after are always the ones who matter." And from that day, Charles started building James into the role he had already made up his mind about. Over the years that followed, Charles had James privately tutored. He armed him with everything he needed. And finally, it was time for Charles to present to him the Sword of Honor. January 2026 arrived and whispers began moving through senior court circles about a private meeting between Charles and James at Balmoral. Charles had told James that the Windsor name would be carried forward not by the son sitting in California, but by him. And here is what makes this land so differently from everything else in this story. James said nothing to anyone, not even his own parents, for 3 straight months. He walked through every single day, holding a secret that was about to split a family wide open, and he carried it without one visible crack. But choosing James was only the first move. Charles needed that decision sealed shut and impossible for anyone to fight in any courtroom anywhere, and he had already figured out exactly how to do it. What the king built in secret. At 4:47 in the morning on April 23, 2026, a single lamp burned in the private study at Windsor Castle. Charles sat alone at his desk, pressing his pen to the final clause of the letter's patent that stripped Harry of his military honors. The document was collected an hour later, sealed, and sent on its way. But what happened at noon is the moment in this story that cuts the deepest. In the quadrangle at Windsor, a ceremony took place with only household cavalry and 2 court photographers present. At the center of it stood the Damascene sword of the Royal Marines. But to understand the full force of what Charles did when he placed that sword into James's hands, you have to understand what that sword had meant to Harry first. To understand what Charles did when he placed that sword in James's hands, you have to go back to 2020. Harry attended a private presentation at Lympstone Commando in Devon. That is the home base of the Royal Marines, the most elite fighting force in the British military. Harry had been their Captain General since 2017. He had earned that relationship. He had shown up for those men. He had trained alongside them, visited them on deployment, sat with their families. It was the one part of royal life that felt completely real to him. And at that presentation in Lympstone, Harry held the Damascene sword for the first time. Officers who were there say he held it like a man who already knew it belonged to him. Then Megxit happened, and the palace began stripping Harry of everything. His military titles went first, every single one. And when Harry was told the Captain General role was gone too, he accepted it. He did not fight it publicly, but he said one thing to a single aide that has since leaked out through people close to the Sussex household. He said, "Not that sword, not that one." That sword was the last thing he asked to keep. Out of everything, that was the one thing. Charles knew that. He knew exactly what that sword meant to his son, and he gave it to James anyway. Charles placed the sword into James's gloved hands and spoke one word: duty. The quadrangle went completely still. That sword was not ceremonial. It was a direct transfer of royal responsibility. It meant James now stood as a working representative of the crown. It gave him a formal place in the line of duty, a seat at tables Harry had sat at, a voice in rooms Harry had spoken in. Everything Harry had carried as a senior working royal was now James's to take forward. But the sword was only one half of what Charles had built. The other half was a legal trap, and by the time anyone understood what it truly was, it was already sealed shut and locked from every direction. Buried inside that letter's patent was a rule that stated that any royal descendant who spent fewer than half the days of the year on British soil would lose their honors entirely. Simple, clean, and absolutely crushing. It had a name: the 183-Day Doctrine. Harry's children, Archie and Lilibet, live in California. They were already in breach the moment Charles lifted his pen from that page. Harry's lawyers had 6 months from the date of signing to challenge it in court. But here is what made it genuinely unwinnable. Charles had not stopped at the letters patent. At the exact same moment, he had driven a separate bill through Parliament known as the Regency Amendment Bill. This bill rewrote the law on who could legally stand in for the king when he was unable to carry out his duties. Under this bill, Harry would be permanently removed from that list and replaced by James. So Harry was now fighting 2 separate battles at the same time. The first was against the letters patent, but courts have ruled over and over that the king has the full right to give or take royal honors as he sees fit. Challenging that is almost impossible. But even if Harry somehow won that fight, the Regency Amendment Bill would still be sitting there untouched, and bringing down a bill that had already passed through Parliament required a completely separate legal fight running at the exact same time. Every lawyer who looked at it said the same thing: it cannot be done. Charles had not just made a decision. He had locked every single door before Harry even knew there was a building. The cost of Charles's decision. When the news reached Harry, something in him broke open. It was the sword that hit him hardest. Yet there was almost nothing he could do about it. The news spread quietly within the royal family. Some felt indifferent, others mocked Harry. And Camilla's son, Tom Parker Bowles, had his own opinion. Days after James received the Sword of Honor, Camilla arranged a dinner at Windsor. She called it a routine family gathering. Tom Parker Bowles was there, seated at the far end of the table from the king. Tom has spent his entire life watching this family from just outside the door, close enough to know every unspoken rule, never close enough to have a single one work in his favor. No titles, no honors, nothing with his name on it. At some point during that dinner, he leaned toward his mother and said it quietly, only to her. He looked at the king, who had just placed a centuries-old sword in a teenager's hands, and said, "The wrong people always get the swords." He said it like the whole thing disgusted him. He was making it clear that he thought the king had made the wrong decision by choosing James. Didn't the king see others? Didn't he see him? Camilla heard every word. Camilla said nothing, not one word, maybe because she had no answer, or maybe because deep down she knew Tom was right. But the hardest moment of all did not happen in that dining room. It did not happen between adults who understood exactly what had been done and why. The hardest moment happened in a house in California, when Harry's son, Archie, walked through the front door after school and asked his mother a question she had no honest answer for. Archie had no idea what a letters patent was. He did not know what the 183-day rule meant. He did not know any of it. He just walked in one afternoon and asked his mother why the other kids at school kept bringing up his name. Their parents had been following the royal story closely and talking about it at home, and their children had carried it to school the next morning and aimed it directly at him. Megan sat down with him. She told him his grandfather had made a decision, and things were going to look different now. She kept it as simple as she could possibly manage. What she could not tell him was the full truth. The sword was gone forever. That was never coming to Archie. But the 183-day rule had done something different and even colder to his own title. Archie was born a prince. That title belonged to him the moment he entered the world. But under this new rule, he could not use it, claim it, or be recognized by it for as long as he lived in California. It was still legally his on paper, just completely beyond reach in real life. Every single piece of it could come back. All he had to do was leave California, leave his school, leave the only life he had ever known, and spend more than half of every year on British soil for the rest of his life. He was 6 years old, and that clock had already been running. As all these went on, James was already at the work, already becoming exactly what Charles had been building him toward from the very beginning. The shadow lengthens. The morning after Charles signed that document, James was already sitting at his desk. His schedule was brutal. Mornings were Commonwealth governance sessions. Afternoons were parade drills at Purbright Barracks. Evenings, he sat directly across from the king with no one else in the room, and Charles said the same things to him again and again. Never guess out loud. Speak only in facts. Let other people say the good things about you first. James took every word in and said nothing to anyone. Shortly after the patent was signed, James attended a Windsor reception for Commonwealth representatives. At one point, he said something that no one had prepared for him. Something about shared service and a common history. He did not try to impress anyone in that room. He did not try to make people like him. He said something honest, and then he sat back down. And that was exactly what people noticed. Not the sentence itself, but what he did. He did not perform warmth at people he had just met. He did not make sure every important person left with a strong impression of him. He just showed up. He did what was needed. He went quiet when there was nothing left to say. Harry had spent years trying to make people understand him. Every statement was Harry trying to explain himself to a world he believed had got him completely wrong. James was doing something else entirely. He was not explaining anything. He was not trying to win anyone over. He just came, did the work, and left. The people in that room had watched royals perform their whole lives. What stopped them cold was a young man who did not appear to need a single thing from any of them, and that was exactly what made him so hard to argue against. But two serious problems are sitting directly in front of him, and none of them have clean answers. The first is in Parliament. The Regency Amendment Bill still needs to pass. This is the bill that makes everything real. It takes Harry's name permanently off the list of people allowed to act as king when Charles cannot carry out his duties. It puts James's name there instead. Without this bill passing, James has the sword and nothing solid behind it. Support from members across both sides of Parliament looks strong. But the Parliament has stopped kings before. One wrong word on one bad afternoon and the entire thing can fall apart. The second problem is the most dangerous of all. Word has leaked through royal staff that Meghan is planning a live television interview. Nobody is officially supposed to know yet, but the information is already moving through the palace, and it is moving fast. And what she is planning to say is not small. She is going to talk about Harry. She is going to lay out everything that has been taken from him, his military titles, his place in the line, his children's futures. The sword his father knew meant everything to him, now in another man's hands. The titles his children were born with, now locked behind a rule nobody ever asked them to accept, all of it removed by his own father. Meghan is going to place every single piece of that in front of the entire world on live television. And James is right in the center of all of it. He is the one sitting in Harry's old seat. He is the one holding that sword. He is the living face of everything Harry has just lost, showing up every single day and saying nothing, just working. The palace believes that when people see that, they will respect James, and in this family, respect is the only thing that lasts. No interview can take that away. But can an 18-year-old boy actually carry all of this without breaking? The palace believes he can. They watched Charles build this boy from the ground up. They watched him carry secrets alone for 2 years without cracking. They believe James already proved who he is. And when Meghan's interview hits and the noise gets loud, James will still be there, head down, doing the work, earning more respect with every single day that passes. And that, the palace believes, is the only thing that matters in the end. Steady, unbroken, and ready.